You had a wonderful, wonderful holiday, a wonderful Easter. I certainly did. We've got a lot to get to as we kick off the week right here, including quite a squabble going on at the Pentagon with Pentagon staffers being accused of leaking. And then, of course, Pete Hegseth firing back in a pretty dynamic way as the president, I should point out, backs him 1,000%. So very interesting stuff going on there. We're going to talk about Leticia James, for goodness sakes. She's really getting nervous. I mean, really legitimately nervous. And you know what? I'll tell you this, she should be. And you know what? She deserves every single bit of this. We'll get into Leticia James. We also have to talk about this Maryland migrant situation, which is just blowing up here, especially over the weekend as we saw Sen Van Hollen. He's the senator from Maryland that got kind of played or duped, if you would, by Bukele, by going down there. And there was that scene with the margaritas, even though they weren't really margaritas. Anyway, he's now effectively calling this guy an American. Wait until you hear that sound. I'm going to play it all for you. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Trish Regan. Make sure you subscribe, share, like, make a comment. Again, we're live, so I see it all. Great to have you here. The Pentagon is in a bit of a mess with the guy who's running the whole entire place. Yet Pete Hegseth is firing back at his entire team that may be trying to take him down. This is fascinating because it's effectively like the neocons at work, right? You have a whole system that is not designed to like somebody, like a newcomer like Pete Hegseth coming in there. And they've been leaking, and he's been getting sort of tarred and feathered, if you would, for this whole signalgate thing, saying, oh, you know, it's Pete's fault because Pete sent the sensitive information. He disputes that, argues that it wasn't that sensitive, it wasn't classified information. Well, now a new thing came out over the weekend, and of course it went straight to the New York Times, alleging that Pete Hegseth shared attack details in a second Signal chat with his wife and his brother. Now, his wife is a former Fox News producer. You know, I used to work with Pete. I worked with her. I know them well. She's kind of like the producer, right? In the relationship, I think his wife is very, very involved in what he does. We know that, right? Because the New York Times also reported that when he was meeting with foreign leaders, she was there as well. So that's sort of a given. Whether or not he should have been communicating on Signal, don't forget, we can go back to what we learned before, everyone. And what did we learn? We learned that this was the Biden White House method of communication. We learned that the people that were in charge of the CIA under Joe Biden passed this along, this Signal communication app, to the team that was coming in for Trump and said, have at it, you can trust this, et cetera, et cetera. So whether or not you want to argue, oh, you know, maybe he shouldn't have been sharing information with his wife over this app, et cetera, why is it that Biden's team was like, here you go, this is great? I mean, Pete is sort of new to the intelligence circle, new, of course, to the military. Well, not, I mean, he had a background in the military, but new as, you know, Pentagon chief, right? He was a reporter last time I checked. And they're like, yeah, go ahead and use this. And there was no sort of schooling, if you would, on how to use it or what to be sensitive for. I still go back to my suspicion that somebody was trying to do all of them in originally, when it was discovered that somehow the Atlantic reporter, Jeffrey Goldberg, had been added to their little chat, right? Mike Waltz is like, oh, it's my fault, I created the chat. And, you know, Pete happened to use it. And then they're trying to take him down. I think that they're like sharks in the water, right? They smell blood. Well, Pete's not having it. Trump's not having it. I want to show you what Pete Hegseth, Secretary Hegseth, said outside at the Easter bunny thing, you know, the egg rolling ceremony at the White House yesterday. He's like, look, these people are all about fake news and they're all trying to take me down. And I am here ready, willing, and able to fight because this is our future. This is our kids' future, he said as he had his kids like right there.
Kids right here. This is why we're fighting the fake news media. This is why we're fighting slash and burn Democrats. This is why we're fighting hoaxsters. This group, this group right here, full of hoaxsters that peddle anonymous sources from leakers with access to grind, and then you put it all together as if it's some news story. And when we know it, we know exactly what it is. So I'm really proud of what we're doing for the president, fighting hard across the board, and I'm going to go roll some Easter eggs with my kids. Thank you very much.
Okay. So he's saying, like, these guys are all fake news. You've never trusted them to begin with. I mean, consider who they are. It got worse. Okay, so no sooner did he do that. Remember, he's calling them fake news, this, that, and the other. Do you remember who published the big 51X spook article, when they decided it would be a little damage control if they could get John Brennan and the rest of them, right, to come out and say that that laptop was not fake, it was none other than Politico. You know what else we know about Politico? Politico was getting all kinds of money from USAID in the way of $10,000 a month subscriptions that amounted to millions of dollars. Interestingly enough, they really spiked up in the year 2024. I digress. I only point that out to say Politico is part of the system, okay? New York Times is part of the system, okay? So when I find articles in the New York Times or in Politico, I always have to sit back and say, okay, what's this? Just like you would anybody's bias, right? So I can say, in all fairness, when you see an article in Breitbart or when you see an article on Fox or Newsmax, hey, when you know what? I like to think I'm super, super duper fair here on this show, but you probably know my bias. And so you have to understand the bias of all these publications. In the case of Politico, they have received millions of dollars from USAID. They are not in a good position right now because, well, the USAID stuff, that is poof, gone. And all the stuff that Pete stands for is stuff that they tend to stand against. So they're the ones that published this top Pentagon spokesperson article that came out just last night, Sunday night. This is kind of a big deal, okay? So this is the guy that used to be the top spokesperson at the Pentagon, and he's now taking aim at Pete Hegseth because he said the whole place has turned into a total disaster. It's a total mess under Pete. His name, and I'll surely get this wrong, is John Oliot. He's the former Pentagon chief spokesperson, lead communications at the NSC and at the Department of Veterans Affairs in President Donald Trump's first term. He's pointed out over and over again in this piece, by the way, that he was good friends with Pete and he wanted the best for Pete, but the place is just a total mess. He says, and I quote, "It's been a month of total chaos at the Pentagon, from leaks to sensitive operational plans to mass firings. The dysfunction is now a major distraction for the president, who deserves better from his senior leadership. President Donald Trump has a strong record of holding his top officials to account. Given that, it's hard to see Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth remaining in his role much longer." So that's where I just am going to pause for a second. I think Donald Trump has very much a soft spot for Pete. He knows he's been through ATLL and back in terms of this whole approval process. Nobody wanted him to have the gig. He does, on a personal level, I can tell you, he trusts Pete. And he wants people there that he can trust. Whether or not Pete can trust all the people around him, the whole system, so to speak, I think that's a fair question. And I think Pete is trying to get to the bottom of that, which is why he kept firing all those people. Edgar, good to see you back here. Thank you for your generosity. Very good to have you here on the show. So there were a series of people. Remember Dan Caldwell, we talked about this last week, as well as Darren Selnick, the Deputy Chief of Staff, and Colin Carroll, Chief of Staff to the Deputy Secretary of Defense. In the aftermath, he writes, Defense Department officials working for Hegseth tried to smear the aides anonymously to reporters, claiming they were fired for leaking sensitive information as part of an investigation ordered earlier this month. Well, we talked about that, did we not? We talked about how they're trying to root out the leakers and they're trying to get rid of the people that are problematic. And I think bottom line, Pete Hegseth doesn't trust these people, even though this guy who's so loyal, he's out in Politico, before he can even catch his breath, writing an op-ed telling everybody how awful Pete's leadership is. I mean, if I'm Pete, this was my trusted guy. Thank God he resigned, right? Thank God he's out of there, because, who needs friends when you get enemies like that? Or who needs enemies, I should say, when you get friends like that? So I'm suspecting that Pete Hegseth felt pretty strongly that he couldn't trust this inner circle, including Dan Caldwell, Darren Selnick, and Colin Carroll. We do know that Dan Caldwell was actually escorted out of the building, and they're making the point here in this political piece that was very, very deliberate. In other words, they leaked the information about Dan for a deliberate reason, to try and tarnish him on his way out the door. He does say that none of these guys were disloyal, right? So that was the allegation, that they were leaking, and so they were fired for their leaking. And he says, you know what, none of this is true. While the department did say that it was going to conduct these polygraphs, for example, as part of the probe, none of those guys were given polygraphs. So I don't know how Pete came to the conclusion that they were responsible. Somehow, some way, he did, and he felt strongly enough about it that he had to get rid of them. Of course, he probably should have gotten rid of this guy too, right? Like, let's just be honest here. I mean, this guy was supposed to be his number one there as his spokesperson at the Pentagon, and yet as soon as he leaves his job, which he said he didn't have to leave, he's out there firing off an op-ed to Politico. So Politico reported on Friday that Hegseth's chief of staff, Joe Casper, was leaving his role. Casper had requested the investigation into the Pentagon leaks, which reportedly included military operational plans for the Panama Canal and a pause in the collection of intelligence for Ukraine. So those things were getting leaked. Who was leaking them? In Pete's view, it may have been these individuals that were quite close to him. We don't know right now, but, he's in charge. He should be able to pick his own team. I would say that they're suggesting that there are going to be more problems, more firings to come. I would imagine, yeah. I mean, here's the reality. You know what, Donald Trump, at least for now, and we'll see what happens, but I can tell you that he personally has a soft spot for this guy. He really does like Pete. And Pete was very much an ally of his on television. Don't forget Fox and Friends on the weekends. And I think that he's willing to see him through this. I mean, we'll see if it amounts to much, much more. But here's Caroline Leavitt on Fox and Friends this morning saying, you know what? The president has Pete's back. Watch.
The president stands strongly behind Secretary Hegseth, who is doing a phenomenal job leading the Pentagon. And this is what happens when the entire Pentagon is working against you and working against the monumental change that you are trying to implement. Secretary Hegseth was nominated for this position because he is standing up for the war fighter, the men and women in uniform who are putting their lives on the line to protect our country and our homeland. And unfortunately, there have been people at that building who don't like the change the secretary is trying to bring, so they are leaking and they are lying to the mainstream media. We've seen this game played before. The secretary is doing a tremendous job, and the president stands strongly behind him.
Wow. Okay. So she's basically saying it's the Pentagon that's the problem. It's not Pete. It's the Pentagon that's the problem. And there are people in the Pentagon that do not like the direction all of this is heading with. And as a result of that, they're leaking like you wouldn't believe and causing all of these problems. So there's a lot of fury there on behalf of Pete, on behalf of the president. You hear it in Caroline. By the way, she's very good at her job. I just got to say this is a huge improvement over KGP. I'll take Caroline any day of the week, just for clarity's sake, right? I mean, you kind of get the impression she knows what she's talking about. But reality is this. There's a lot of fury happening internally. Here is what Pete Hegseth put out. After the Democrats, how do you like this? The Democrats are saying Pete Hegseth needs to go. He responds with, your agenda is illegals, trans, and DEI, all of which are no longer allowed. Okay, so I think they smell blood in the water. They think that this is their opportunity to take this guy out, and so they're going to work as hard as they can at it. But I'll tell you, you know what? They're wrong on it if they think that Donald Trump is going to fold just because they're going after Pete Hegseth so viciously. I think Donald Trump, if anything, is going to be there saying, Pete, I got your back. I got your back. I would say this, whatever's going on with the leakers, they got to fix that. You can't have a Pentagon that has so much hostility to the guy that's leading it. I would hope that his trusted advisors were not the people that were leaking, but clearly, Pete believes that to be the case, and thus we're in the situation we're in right now. I mean, none of this is good. None of it's good for the markets. None of it's good for our international standing. I mean, look at the markets right now. I mean, we're down significantly on the S&P, down 3.15%. Dow Jones Industrial Average down 3%. And NASDAQ down 3 and nearly 0.5%. This is kind of alarming, guys, really alarming. And I encourage you, if you haven't done it, you got to get my research, okay? 76research.com. Go over there, check it out. Use code word dollar. Look, hopefully we can help you through these turbulent times because all three of our portfolios are weathering the storm quite decently under the circumstances. But indeed, we have a challenging time ahead, and we have a challenging time because volatility is back. That's just the name of the game. I'm looking at gold, which is skyrocketing again today. At last check, up more than 3% in one day. That's a big deal. What have I been telling you for a long time now? Look, we're an independent show. We have advertisers. The 76 Research is my own company I started, but this is one of our great advertisers. TrishLovesGold.com is where you need to go to get more information on how to get up to $15,000 in free silver from American Heart for Gold, or text Trish to 65532 1-844-495-1115. Because we look at a market sell-off like this, what you're actually seeing is one of the things that holds out best and continues to triumph in an environment like this is something like gold. We're actually up nearly 3% right now at $3,437 an ounce. My gosh, Goldman Sachs, of course, predicting $4,000 by year. And check them out. Go to trishlovesgold.com today. The Maryland migrant is a great example, I think, of how delusional these Democrats have become. Christopher Van Hollen, he goes all the way down there. Remember last week to El Salvador, he's camping out, he can't get a meeting, and finally something comes through. Then he comes back and he goes on to the Sunday shows, and I'm just stunned. I'm stunned with what he called one of these migrants. Again, we saw him down there, hanging out with this gentleman, Abrego Garcia, and they spoke. And there were opportunities for Chris Van Hollen to ask him probably important questions, which he didn't. I'll get to that in a second. But before I do, understand the backdrop here. The Democrats are so set on having these open borders that they can't see the forest for the trees, to the point where this Chris Van Hollen actually seems to think that the Maryland migrant who was deported is actually an American citizen, right? Let's listen together.
I think at some point, the president of El Salvador realized it was looking really bad to have this person who had been absconded from America, from the streets of Maryland.
Woo! He caught that one pretty quick, right? Listen again. Here's the moment. There's someone who was from, oops.
Looking really bad to have this person who had been absconded from America, from the streets of Maryland, in one of their prisons.
Yeah. Okay. So you can see how convoluted this stuff gets, to the point where you actually think the person who is here illegally is an alleged member of MS-13, allegedly hurt his wife to the point where she actually needed to seek police protection. Somehow now he's the good guy? Think about that. He's the quote-unquote American. He almost said it, guys. He almost did. Donald Trump saying this is not a good guy. Get your facts straight, buddy.
He's a fake. I know him. I know them all. They're all fake. And they have no interest in that prisoner. That prisoner's record is unbelievably bad. They talk about how evil I am, that this man would be thrown out of our country. This man is according to certified statements that we get, is a very violent person. And they want this man to be brought back into our country where he can be free and to stay as a happily Maryland, they call him the Maryland man. He's a Maryland father. No, this is a violent person.
Okay. So Donald Trump trying to set the record straight on who this guy is and whether or not he's really the upstanding citizen. And I say citizen, I'm laughing, quote unquote, American citizen, right? Because that's how they kind of have you thinking at this point. And that's not great when you get a guy who, one, is not a citizen, two, is here illegally, three, has been twice, with run-ins with the law, and they've held him, and they wouldn't even allow him to leave in one case. They wouldn't even give him bail because they alleged he was a member of MS-13. And now we learn that the wife needed protection, something that she actually couldn't defend herself when she was on Good Morning America. We'll get to that, but first, keep in mind what Pam Bondi is alleging about her.
Night to President Trump.
Well, I'm trying to understand that part, and I'm looking at the timeline. I'm looking at what the courts have said about him. I'm looking about what ICE has said about him. I'm looking even though I'm having a hard time understanding why his wife is advocating for him to come back. Why is everybody saying he's a man from Maryland? What do you make of Senator Van Hollen and, this performative art that he's involved in El Salvador, and of which he was unsuccessful today?
Well, America is safer because he is gone. Maryland is safer because he is gone. And that woman that he is married to and that child he had with her, they are safer tonight because he is out of our country.
Okay, so she's making the point that, the wife had requested a couple of times from law enforcement some protection from him. This is something that came up on Good Morning America on Friday. And I'm telling you, she just totally froze. Like, it's the elephant in the room. It's the question you have to ask, and yet she couldn't answer this. Take a look.
I have to ask it. You did take out a temporary order of protection against your husband in 2021. Were you in fear of your husband?
Wow.
My husband is alive. That's all I can say.
Okay, and I'm not going to push on that apparently. But how much hope?
Apparently, no, you're not going to push on that because you're not actually a journalist. Not that anybody at ABC News is a journalist these days. For goodness sakes, that is just awful. Okay, I'm sorry, that is just awful. So the elephant in the room is that she's married to this bad dude that she's had to go and seek police protection from, and then she doesn't even have anything that she can say on that. Anything at all? Give me a break. I'm sorry. You know what? And this whole crew, they don't even care what his criminal record is at all. The MS-13 thing, that came up. Nobody would actually talk about that. Literally, CNN asked, and Van Hollen's like, no, this doesn't matter. It didn't come up. Quick shout out to my friends over at Balance of Nature. You know, I take the fruits and veggies every single day. We love Balance of Nature. We appreciate their patronage here on the show. You can get your fruits and veggies too, and therefore get all your important vitamins. It's critical right now, especially as allergy season kicks in. I'll tell you, I like having all those vitamins, making sure specifically I get my vitamin D. I get it from Balance of Nature. Go check them out at balanceofnature.com. You can read all their stories, not just my testimonial, but thousands of testimonial from thousands of people. They make millions of these things. I was thinking that the other day because I sometimes get a little obsessed with numbers. It's the financial background. I was like, I wonder how many hundreds of millions of fruits and gummies they must make a year. Go check them out. Balanceofnature.com. Do use my name, Trish. You're going to get 35% off, plus free shipping, plus a free money back guarantee. Win, win, win. It helps me as well as helping you. They could have asked if he was part of MS-13. Van Hollen had that opportunity to ask him about his background and apparently chose not to. Like the subject never even came up when they sat down together at that nice nifty little meeting in El Salvador. Here is CNN asking Van Hollen, did you bother? Listen to his answer.
President Trump says that some of Abrego Garcia's tattoos signify that he's a member of MS-13. In 2019, police alleged a confidential informant claimed that Abrego Garcia was an active MS-13 member. His wife and his attorney deny that, of course. Can you say with absolute certainty that he is not, nor has he ever been a member of the MS-13 gang? And did you ask him point blank?
Well, Dana, what Donald Trump is trying to do here is change the subject. The subject at hand is that he and his administration are defying a court order to give Abrego Garcia his due process right.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. We're going to play the rest of it. But what the heck, buddy? No, the issue is also, is he a criminal who was here illegally, who was part of MS-13 and then got the adjudicated deportation order and now he's out and you don't think it matters at all? Not just a little tiny little smidge.
They are trying to litigate on social media what they should be doing in the courts. They need to put up or shut up in the courts. Let me tell you, and I decided to write this down so I could be absolutely accurate as to what federal district court Judge Zinnes said about these allegations by the Trump administration. Quote, no evidence linking Abrego Garcia to MS-13 or any terrorist activity has been presented to the court. That's where to litigate this. Mm-hmm. It's been litigated in many other places. So I'm not going to get into the details because the whole purpose of our court system is for them to adjudicate these things, not for Donald Trump to go off on social media.
Yeah, you're right. They have not, there hasn't been a court hearing for them to put forward evidence in the first place, which is your whole point. But since you were the one person to have met with him, and since this is a thing, you say on social media, it's what we hear from Donald Trump and Republicans every day, all day long, you didn't ask him?
I didn't ask him that because I know what his answer is.
No, he didn't ask him that because he already told you, Dana. He doesn't care. He freaking doesn't care. Let that sit in for just 2 seconds. I mean, think about the Maryland mom, right? Patty, who's there with President Trump, and she's sobbing, and it's been an emotional time for her. And he's like, wow, this woman has been through hell. And he's saying to her, you got to be strong. And, your daughter's gone, but, maybe there's a bigger purpose here that we can have together. And she's saying, Van Hollen didn't even bother to do anything when I lost my daughter. He's all about these open borders. And look what happens as a result of open borders. Now, let me be very clear. I get it. It's not oranges to oranges. We can't say that just because this guy was here illegally, that he's then therefore a risk to people. But when you allow for illegal immigration, you encourage illegal immigration, guess what? Guess what happens? You actually run serious risk that you're going to have more problems. When you look at those numbers, oh my gosh, we've looked at that chart, right? From Axios, and you had upwards of 250,000 people coming in here illegally every single month until Donald Trump came in, when miraculously it just plunges by 96%. Incredible, right? Well, what do you think the consequences of having people here illegally like that really are? They're actually pretty significant, so significant when you look at states, for example, like California or Texas, that have had to struggle with their education. They're in those states. Why? Because they've got to accommodate all of these people that they didn't think that they would have to accommodate before. Stephen Miller talking about this on Newsmax, saying, effectively, what the US of A deserves, states like California actually deserve. He told my friend Rob Schmidt on Friday night, he said they deserve, you ready for it, guys? Reparations. Yeah, they deserve reparations, he said, because it is absolutely not fair. Reparations for California, for Texas, for any of these states that have had to suffer as a result of the massive influx of people into the educational system. So he went on Newsmax, he said, enough, we need to do something about this. And he wants to demand that these countries come forward with some other way to pay for all of the difficulties that they've caused us. So I thought that was kind of interesting and somewhat creative, and a new way to think about it, because certainly we have suffered, have we not, as a result of all of this migration in certain states, most in particular. But I would also say this, the Democrats continually just seem to be on the wrong side of the issue. When you don't even ask the question, is he a member of a gang? You expose yourself, making yourself vulnerable to comments like I heard from Scott Jennings on CNN last week. Let's listen.
Van Hollen posted a picture of him sitting with Abrego Garcia at a table.
I see these pictures tonight, and I think, boy, the party of women is really covering itself in glory tonight. I mean, I don't understand why the American left falls in love with the worst people. You've got a gang-banging, human-trafficking, wife-beating illegal alien, and a United States senator in a ludicrous display of energy is in El Salvador having Mai Tais and Yahtzee. I do not get it. I do not understand why the left takes on the heroes people like that. I don't get it.
I think
he has an adjudicated deportation order, and you have Democrat public officials falling all over themselves trying to get him back here without thinking through the next step, which is he's literally going to be deported somewhere else.
But he did have due process. Everything we know about him is documented because he did go through the court systems. He was stopped for trafficking. His wife did file these domestic violence charges against him. He was arrested with MS-13 members with a roll of cash that had the eyes and the ears and the mouths of the presidents erased, which is an MS-13 markings. This is all non-disputed.
Average American looking at this case, a lot of conflicting information. Okay, I believe some, I don't believe. An illegal alien came here in 2011, and somehow in 2025, he's still here? After having been through the court system, after having been arrested with lots of people in his car, after having all this evidence.
Deport him?
He just did, and now everybody's mad about it. How
Donald
did an
Trump
illegal alien take advantage of our system for 14 years and not get away?
Him?
Haha, all right. So, yeah, he did deport him, and look what happens then. Well, we'll see. There's some additional developments happening as we speak. The Supreme Court is telling Donald Trump that you cannot use the Alien Act now of 1798 to be able to deport some Venezuelans that are believed to be part of another gang, TDA, and therefore really acting violently against, in the president's view, the interests of our country. I will say this, Caroline Leavitt nailed it when she said this morning, I'm going to show you a clip from Fox and Friends when she called them out, Van Hollen and the rest of them, because this was Easter weekend, and what side of the equation were they on? Watch.
He is an illegal alien, a foreign terrorist, and a criminal MS-13 gang member who violated our country's laws by coming here in the first place. And shame on Senator Chris Van Hollen and the entire Democrat Party, who wasted Easter Sunday going on every television show in the country to advocate for the return of an illegal criminal gang member.
Yeah. You know what? It really wasn't time well spent. It really wasn't. And then here you got to ask yourself this question, guys. Who's going to pay for all this? Van Hollen traveling down to El Salvador, hanging out there. Apparently, in his view, you pay. You, the taxpayer, are responsible for paying. I don't think the taxpayer appreciates that very much. Here, he said it on Fox over the weekend. Don't doubt me. Watch.
Who did pay for this trip?
This was an officially cleared congressional trip, cleared on a bipartisan basis. Yes, like every other trip.
Really? Okay, well, don't tell Comer that, because Comer said just last week, I want to make sure you know your request is denied. I write in response to your April 15th, 2025 letter requesting that I approve from the committee's budget official travel for you both to visit the country of El Salvador to meet with a foreign MS-13 gang member whose wife accused him of crimes and who is strongly suspected of human trafficking. It is absurd that you both displayed active hostility for over 2 years towards the committee's oversight of the Biden border crisis and the consequences of millions of illegals entering the country, and yet now you are seeking to travel at committee's expense to meet with foreign gang members. It's like, guys, where is your allegiance? Like, what about being on the side of everyday Americans? Whatever happened to that? I mean, this is why Miller is now coming out. Stephen Miller went on to Newsmax on Friday night onto Rob Schmidt's show and said, hey, you know what? This is not fair. You think of the cost to our society, the cost to specific states, including California, Texas, or any state that's had to deal with this massive migration, and it's enormous. And we ought to be asking for reparations from the likes of Mexico as a result. Let me see if I can find you the sound, because this is just incredible, guys. I mean, talking about turning all of this on its head, right? Just turning all of it on its head. Let's watch it together. Here's Miller speaking there on, can we get it? I think we can. We'll give it a shot here. Stephen Miller speaking out. Perhaps not. Anyway, I will translate for you what he said, which was basically that, you know what, you can't do this. You can't do this because it doesn't work for our society. Like, at some point, there's too many people on the boat and the boat sinks. My words, not his. But he wants compensation because the boat's been sinking because they keep sending people here. And so it's a very new way of thinking of this. I've been playing you Miller clips all week. He's fired up, super fired up, and he has every reason to be. Right? Every reason to be. You know who else is fired up right now? Leticia James. There have been new allegations that she engaged in mortgage fraud. She's freaking out, and understandably so, because guess what? She's now got reporters showing up at this quote unquote home that she has in New York, which apparently she shouldn't have, because she said her primary residence in the mortgage application, which is now being deemed to possibly be fraudulent, was actually in New York. I mean, she actually is the Attorney General of New York. Therefore, how could her prime residence be in a state like Virginia, as it was implied on the mortgage application? Anyway, here's the Daily Caller showing up at her house. Let's watch this one together.
Hi there. I'm a reporter with the Daily Caller News Foundation.
Goodbye. You're trespassing.
I'm sorry.
Trespassing. My kids are out here.
I understand. We mean no trouble. We're just curious who the occupants of the home are,
because
there's
about who's occupants. That's none of your business.
Well, there are connections. There are connections to New York Attorney General Leticia James.
That doesn't matter. You're trespassing.
Are you related to Leticia James?
Do you know her?
You're trespassing. Go in the house.
Do you know
You're
Leticia James?
trespassing.
No?
You're
Okay.
trespassing.
No comment. Thank you,
Don't
ma'am.
pull up to my house no more.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. You have a good one.
You will. Be well.
They were polite, walking off. And they get in trouble with the neighbors, I think, here in this clip.
Car parked in the driveway.
Hello there, ma'am. No comment?
You're trespassing. No comment.
Okay, who lives here?
Who lives here, ma'am?
No comment.
Okay, no comment. You're trespassing. Get out of my property. I'm sure that's not fun, right? Leticia James, though, she's getting kind of rattled by this, so rattled that she actually decided to speak out. She actually decided to go on with some liberal reporter that she thought would, sing her tune and call this out. We got the same old, a whole bunch of sound bites that you would likely hear. If you haven't seen this yet, you need to. It just came out on Friday afternoon. Let's watch it together and digest.
Good to see you, Ms. James. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Errol.
Absolutely. What is going on here? Did anybody contact you before this letter went out accusing you of this, that, and the other and making a criminal referral about real estate transactions?
No, not at all. And let me just say to all New Yorkers and to all Americans, the allegations are baseless. The allegations are nothing more than a revenge tour. And as you mentioned, my office was successful in securing a $454 million judgment against Donald Trump and others for exaggerating.
By the way, don't even get me started on that one, because that is the most bogus charge that she went after him with. This thing has a heck of a lot more merit. The other one was just ridiculous. Anyway, let's continue listening to Leticia freak out. You can tell she's freaking out. The fact that she's doing this interview to begin with tells you a lot.
The value of his assets. He engaged in a pattern and practice of fraud. And the interest is accruing each and every day while the case is on appeal in the First Department. It's important that individuals know that this is nothing more than the continuation of the tour. He went after law firms, universities, immigrants, women. Thousands of federal employees right now are unemployed. Our government is in chaos and in disarray. Medicaid, Social Security.
And by the way, let me just jump in. Leticia, every single lawsuit that you filed against him for all this stuff, the DEI stuff, where he's taken money from you, you allege, and you want that money back to run your state, or say, I don't know, the disaster stuff, all of it. He's asked for you to justify it. You refuse to, and instead you sue him. So guess what? The courts have already decided you're not getting that money. He actually has the right to withhold that from you. So of course you're freaking out. And now, of course, he's going after you personally. Well, not he himself just yet. Pam Bondi likely will, because this was referred to the DOJ because, well, you can't lie on your mortgage application, Leticia. If you did.
CFPB. And the list goes on and on and on. And as you know, as you mentioned, each and every day, my office is leading the fight against these executive orders, which have no legal import at all, have no legal significance. And we are standing up for the rights and privileges of New Yorkers and Americans. I will not be silenced. I will not be bullied. I will not bend. I will not break.
I have heard that line before. Have you not? William Perkins saying, is she reading a teleprompter? Because it kind of feels like it. No, I think she's just memorized her lines. I will not be silenced. I will not be bullied. You know how I know this? Because I've played so many clips of Leticia James at this point. Thank you for hearing me if you've been listening to them. But I've learned the sequence of her words, the pattern of her words and what she actually says each and every time. And it's always the same.
And I will not bow to anyone. No one is above the law, including the President of these United States.
Okay.
And the Office of the Attorney General will continue to stand up.
Let me follow up of some of what's in this this letter. It says, according to media reports, which for us in the media is kind of a red flag, meaning that it seems to be based on some social media posts that I know were made by partisan political actors. But
I'm just laughing. He's like, according to media reports. And he's like, for us in the media, that's a red flag. I guess if it's not like you that's reporting it, if it's not Politico or the New York Times reporting it, then it's suddenly a red flag. I digress.
Just let me ask you about some of the specifics in the letter. They're saying that your house in Brooklyn is a legal 5-family and the mortgage on it is for a 4-family house. Is that true?
So let me just say that, Errol, you know, as any good attorney, I will not litigate this case.
Woo! She can't answer the question. You get it? Let's go back. He asked, they say, you said it was 4-family when it's really 5-family. Why? Because you get a better mortgage rate, apparently. Oh, gosh darn it. Does that not sound like maybe Donald Trump saying a square footage was one thing when it was actually another? Isn't that what she went after him? Can we sue Leticia James for $500 million? I'd like to ask. Let's hear it again because it's just so good.
Brooklyn is a legal 5-family and the mortgage on it is for a 4-family house. Is that true?
So let me just say that, Errol, you know, as any good attorney, I will not litigate this case in a camera.
Because it's
important that we will respond to these allegations at the appropriate time and in an appropriate way. But I will not go back and forth with respect to these baseless allegations. I am more focused again on standing up for the freedoms, the liberties, and for the rule of law in the state of New York.
I was under the impression by all of this that what they were really looking for is what they got, which is a headline saying, Tish James is under a criminal investigation. Is that pretty much what's going on here?
Yeah, that's what they got. That's what they got. And it's unfortunate that you have some of these right-wing conservative individuals who are camped out in front of my home and in front of the homes of my relatives in Virginia, harassing them each and every day. And it's unfortunate, knocking on the doors of my neighbors and the neighbors of my relatives in the state of Virginia.
Oh, Leticia, did you ever think about all the things that you did to anybody that supported Trump? Is it really that bad if some of your relatives and your friends and family have to deal with the Daily Caller?
Hi there. I'm
Showing up.
With the Daily Caller News Foundation.
Goodbye, you're trespassing.
I'm sorry.
Trespassing. My kids are out here.
I understand.
We
mean no trouble. We're just curious who the occupants of the home are,
Don't
because
worry
there's
about who's occupants. That's none of your business.
well there
You're
are connections to
Okay, but
New
you're
York Attorney General Leticia
That doesn't
James.
matter. You're trespassing.
Are you related to
You're
Leticia James?
trespassing.
Do you know her?
You're trespassing. Go in the house.
Do you know
You're
Leticia James?
trespassing.
No?
You're
Okay.
trespassing.
No comment. Thank you,
Don't
ma'am.
pull up to my house.
No comment. You're trespassing. Get off my property. Okay. Well, you know what? Leticia James brought this on herself. What do they say? Those in glass houses should not throw stones. I mean, this is going to get good. This is going to get interesting. This is becoming quite fascinating. You know what else is becoming quite fascinating, but maybe not so interesting. Actually, maybe just kind of disturbing, because I don't like seeing the market go down, but it also represents a great opportunity. I will always say that. We got a Fed chief that they're looking to fire. Now, as long as I have known Donald Trump, I'm going to qualify this by saying, as long as I have known him, he has been very unhappy with low interest rates, right? Because he likes, high interest rates. He likes low interest rates, like as low as you can go, baby, because that means it kind of frees things up. It adds more liquidity to the economy. If you're a real estate developer, of course, you love low interest rates, because why? Low interest rates enable you to borrow and then build big properties, and you kind of are able to build those properties at a low rate, in part because of the leverage that the government's helping you provide. Well, you look here. Can you guys see this? I want to show you what the headlines are on everything from, say, like the Wall Street Journal right now, where you see, they've got the Hegseth story too. You can see that the headlines are all about, there we go. I had scrolled down too far. You see Dow tumbles, dollar slides as Trump renews attack on Fed. We've got the market off more than 3% on the Dow, 3% on the S&P, nearly 5% on the NASDAQ. This is a big day, okay? This is not necessarily a good thing. You do see people, however, flocking into treasuries because the yield has come down on the 10-year. That's actually a positive sign. VIX back up nearly 20% at 35 on the VIX. That's the fear gauge, okay? That's the volatility index. You've got gold surging. We've been talking about that. I have a gold advertiser, which is, I would talk about gold if I didn't have a gold advertiser, because I'm just such a big believer in gold. I just didn't think it was going to be this big a deal, shall we say, this fast, this soon. But I'm still liking gold right now because, again, Goldman has a note on 4,000. It's what you want to own in the case of really troubling times. You get the Dow tumbling. You get the dollar sliding. When I'm in my spare time saying, well, I'm going to buy the FXC, which is a hedge on the euro dollar situation, I think that tells you something. It tells you a little something, right? Because anybody who's going overseas this summer for a vacation, you might want to make sure that you've got enough euros to do so, because the US dollar is tumbling. And again, it's on, I'm just going to go back to this because it really is on concerns about the attack on the Federal Reserve. Donald Trump is not a fan of Jerome Powell. So there's this sort of sell America trade that's going on. You get a lot of hedge funds right now saying, okay, I'm shorting the dollar. You've got a lot of people just, I talked to a friend in Argentina who told me everybody's suddenly saving in euros. This hasn't happened since, Tom Brady and Giselle? Remember when Giselle wanted her divorce settlement in euros? This hasn't happened in a while, but markets are on edge, and this is from the Wall Street Journal, about President Trump's tariff war, as well as his threats to fire Fed Chief Jerome Powell. Trump on Monday demanded lower rates in a post on social media, saying costs are trending downward and the economy could slow unless Mr. Too Late, a major loser, lowers interest rates now. Okay, here's what I'm going to tell you about that one. It is true that Jerome Powell has a tendency to be really, really late. And he always has a tendency to do too much. And this is not particular to Jerome. This is the Fed in general. This is always what happens. It's like day late, dollar short, or maybe too many dollars too much, because they come in late to the party and then all of a sudden they have to make up for lost ground because they're not looking at real-time data. The real-time data actually suggests the economy is slowing and inflation is zilch. We got no inflation right now. So if you have no inflation and your economy is slowing, wouldn't you logically then move? Powell's like, no, I'm not doing it. And so when he says I'm not doing it, Donald Trump gets a little bit annoyed and he starts to talk more and more about firing him. And now it's called into question whether or not he really could. But the fact that they're even calling it into question, I don't think he would, by the way. I think that he will do something a little bit more different, which is undermine him, and kind of prop up the guy who they think is going to be the new one, Kevin Warsh. And he's a former Fed governor and married into the Estee Lauder fortune. But great pedigree, I think Stanford, Harvard, all that business. He believes in sound money. Oh, imagine that. Somebody at the Federal Reserve who believes in sound money. Yeah, really. So I'm guessing he might like gold, or at least it believes in some kind of sound money, the dollar not just being, manipulated at will. Although you could argue that they're sort of manipulating the dollar right about now, are they not? By trying to depress it. I would say the ECB was trying to manipulate it on Friday, coming out with a rate cut, but it didn't do much good. No, in fact, people now, they keep looking at what's going on and they keep coming back to the idea of, okay, we need gold. And that's why gold is shooting up more than 3% in today's market. And they're getting nervous. As Rob, my colleague at 76 Research, let me give a quick just sort of a plug for American Hartford Gold, which is one of our sponsors. As you well know, right? Trish loves gold, trishlovesgold.com. Talk to them because you can get, with my name, helps to know people, up to $15,000 in free silver by using my name, going to trishlovesgold.com, or just typing in the word Trish by going over and texting them at 65532. You'd think I'd know that by right now. 65532. Call them at 1-844-495-1115. But I was talking actually with Rob this morning and some other investors. And one of the things that came up in our discussion was, wait a second, I should say markets start volatile week. One of the things that came up in the discussion was, do you really think for 1 second you're going to have people that are preferring to invest in, French equities over Microsoft? Probably not long term, right? So Donald Trump knows he's got a little room to maneuver here, shall we say. And ultimately, while it may be in vogue right now to be anti-America, are you really going to bet against America for the long term? I don't think so. And it's why I want you to consider looking at 76 Research. Again, I've told you about our portfolios, which have all performed really well in the face of this craziness. But, the craziness is going to continue. I do anticipate that. And it's not really craziness. It's just that there's a lot that they're trying to do. And it's different, right? And as soon as something's different, people start to freak out. it had to happen, though. You think about Donald Trump being elected at this point in time, in this moment in history, and I think it had to happen in part when you look at where the world was going. I want to move to what just happened with the Pope. He's dead, of course, at 88 years old. That news happening this morning, just amazing that J.D. Vance was there meeting with him hours ahead of his death. J.D. Vance expressing his sorrow there on social media today. The White House also expressing its sorrow at the loss of the Pope. But it's really kind of incredible because, it's just a weird sort of moment in time. I mean, one of the Pope's last things that he said in his Easter blessing was basically, that he believed in open borders. And it's a little unrealistic. And I get that, people like to think that we can take care of everyone. But it just can't happen. He was effectively a socialist from Argentina, okay? Argentina now has Milei. Milei is hardly a socialist. Milei is a full-blown, I like to say red-blooded American capitalist, but he's from Argentina. And so they're putting in a lot of things that actually are going to help Argentina's economy tremendously. But this Pope Francis, he didn't quite think that way, and he felt very strongly that we needed open borders. And this was something that even came up in his last blessing there. He did meet with Vance. As I said, he presented Vance with some chocolate Easter eggs and a Vatican tie. Vance was very gracious. He said, "I pray for you every day. God bless you." Vance, of course, being a Catholic. And he was quite ill, but he met with him anyway, which that's wonderful. It's good. And it underscores the clout that the Pope had. But don't forget, he is very much of the open border mindset. And it came up here. I'll let CNN express that.
Just the simple message of rest in peace with photos of President Trump and Vice President Vance with the Pope over the last several years. Of course, that meeting with Vance, which just took place yesterday, came as something of a surprise. It was not on Vance's official itinerary for his visit to Rome, but Vance, of course, is himself a Catholic, and he did visit the Vatican for about 20 minutes yesterday, meeting in the Pope's private residence, talking very briefly. The Pope handed him a tie and some large chocolate Easter eggs for his kids before they parted ways, and Vance saying this morning that he had just learned of the passing of Pope Francis. "My heart goes out to the millions of Christians all over the world who loved him." Vance says that he was happy to see him yesterday, though he was obviously very ill. Pope Francis is someone who did have these public clashes both with Vance and with Trump over the course of Trump's presidencies. Even before he was elected in 2016, the Pope talked about this idea of building walls to keep out migrants as something that he said was unchristian, and this sort of continued over the course of his presidencies. Clashes on issues of climate change, on issues of arms sales, on this issue of migration. But I do think it was notable that when President Trump went to visit the Pope at the Vatican in 2017, all of those issues were sort of put to the side, and the president emerged somewhat starstruck by the appearance. He said it was the honor of his lifetime. That's how most presidents emerge from their meetings with the Pope. I've covered several of them now. I'll remember when President Obama invited the Pope here to the White House. There were tens of thousands of people on the South Lawn, more than I've ever seen out there. And then Joe Biden, when he met with the Pope, a similar experience. Obviously, Biden himself, a Catholic. The Pope counseled the Biden family after the death of their son, Beau. And President Biden tweeting this morning that Pope Francis was unlike any who came before him. He said that above all, he was a Pope for everyone. He was the people's Pope, a light of faith, hope, and love.
Kevin, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Much more to learn about reaction inside the White House and all around the world. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay. So reaction in the White House is like, yeah, okay, he was the Pope. Now we're going to get a new Pope. It would be kind of nice. And I'm not speaking for the White House here. I'm just saying this as Trish Regan, as an American who was born Catholic. And I would just say, it would be nice if we could have a Catholic Pope that would embrace some kind of normalcy, right? Like, you can't just say, I get it. Like, we all want to help the world, right? But let's go back to, if you can't help yourself, God helps those who help themselves. Like if you cannot help yourself, how are you going to help the world? And if you're a small community in Texas or California that is dealing with this onslaught of migrants that are coming in, and you can't help them if you can't help your community, I mean, you've been destroyed by this. So I realize that it's sort of, catchy from a religious standpoint to say, hey, we're going to help everyone, but it doesn't actually really work. One of the things that he said is, and I quote, how much contempt, this is the Pope. He actually had his full message read by a stand-in, so to speak, one of the archbishops, because the Pope was too ill to get up and speak. But he said, and I quote, how much contempt is stirred up at times toward the vulnerable, the marginalized, and he specifically said the migrants. So how much contempt is stirred up at times towards the vulnerable, the marginalized, and migrants. So that was a direct sort of hit on what has been going on. And look, I think that we've seen what's happened to Europe with its migration challenges. We've seen what's happened to the U.S. with our migration challenges. And I would just say to the Pope, who's no longer with us, God rest his soul, it's fine in theory to say that, but do I see the Vatican walls opening up? Do I see your zillions of dollars opening up to take care of the issue? The answer is no. Why? Because you're practical too, right? You have to have some practicality at the end of the day, because otherwise the ship goes down. Like, you can only put so many people on it. You have to be able to manage it. So I'm all for coming up with creative solutions, but let's not be as unrealistic as, you can be in your little ivory tower or inside the Vatican, where you're highly protected and you don't actually have to open up and say, come one, come all. So neither can the United States of America. Let's be realistic about it, all right? Again, I want to go back and remind you, this market is crazy. Let us help you. We're going to have another article coming out today. Rob is just back from Japan. He has a lot of ideas on all of this right now. We've been discussing it regularly, even as he's been over there meeting with hedge fund managers. He'll give you sort of a look at that, but more importantly, I think a look together, we will, at how you manage this volatility in this moment in time. As I've said before, right? Buy gold. Gosh, American Hartford Gold, they should love me right about now. I love them. I will say this. I would be talking about gold regardless. I love the fact that you can get $15,000 extra if you work with American Hartford Gold and you use my name. It is great to have you all here. Thank you so much, Greg. I appreciate the generosity. Indeed, I'll get a Diet Coke thanks to you, or Diet Pepsi. I think I like that a little bit better. He's asking whether or not the feds are purposely trying to crash the economy. Gosh, I certainly hope not. Greg, I don't think it helps Donald Trump to say, hey, look at how badly we did in that first quarter when I first came to office. I do think there's a chance, however, that they are trying to crash the dollar a little bit, because when you crash the dollar, it means inflation goes down, right? Oil prices, they're going down because they're priced in dollars. You think about gold prices going up. We haven't talked about that, but that's another reason why gold is going up, because, again, it's priced in dollars. I'm looking at crude oil right now. Trading at $63.53 a barrel, down almost 2% today. So that's pretty significant. And what does that mean? If those prices are going down, then that actually has a very positive effect in terms of bringing inflation lower for the overall economy. So I don't think it's entirely as calculated, and I would hope not, but you look at the method to the madness, and it's not an unrealistic question for you to have, for sure. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. We have much more that we're going to talk about through the week. I will be back, as always, live. I think this is a good time, right? We'll talk tomorrow. See you then.